You know that moment someone twists what you meant, shrugs at your pain, or answers your honesty with that blank expression that says they were never really with you to begin with. And suddenly you feel that old pressure rise in your chest. You start reaching for more words, better words, cleaner words, softer words. You explain your tone, your reasons, your memories, your intentions, your heart, as if one more perfect sentence might finally make them see you. But here's the thing. Most of the time, the problem was never that you were unclear. The problem was that they were never listening in the way that understanding requires. There's a difference between someone who does not get it yet and someone who benefits from not getting it at all. One person is confused. The other is comfortable with your confusion because it keeps you working, proving, shrinking, and handing over more and more of yourself. That is why over-explaining can become something much heavier than communication. It can quietly turn into self-abandonment. It can become the habit of leaving your own center just to chase someone else into theirs. And at first, it feels noble, patient, mature, emotionally intelligent. But after a while, it starts to feel like standing outside your own life with a folder full of evidence, begging for permission to exist as you are. A lot of people learn this pattern early. They learn that being understood is not something freely given. It is something you must earn by being extra clear, extra calm, extra reasonable, extra careful. Maybe you grew up around people who only listened when your pain was translated into something convenient for them. Maybe your emotions were treated like a mess to clean up instead of a truth to meet. So you became excellent at explaining yourself, not because you loved clarity, but because confusion had consequences. This is where it gets interesting. Over-explaining is often not about language at all. It is about the nervous system. Your nervous system is the part of you that scans for safety and danger before your conscious mind even catches up. When you feel dismissed, misread, or emotionally cornered, your body can react as if something deeper is at stake than the conversation itself. It is not just that they do not understand you. It is that some ancient part of you feels that misunderstanding might cost you love, stability, belonging, or peace. So you start managing the room. You explain more, you add context, you soften your edge, you clarify before they ask, you answer questions they haven't even formed yet. You try to prevent conflict by making yourself painfully legible. And the exhausting part is that it can look like self-awareness from the outside, when inside it feels more like emotional survival. But there's more going on. When you explain yourself to the wrong people, you're not just sharing information, you are performing your inner world for an audience that hasn't earned access to it. You are taking the most vulnerable parts of your mind and laying them out like exhibits, hoping that enough detail will create empathy. But dismissive people often do not become more empathetic when given more truth. They become more powerful. Because now they have your reasons, your wounds, your patterns, your insecurities, and still no real intention to hold them carefully. Here's what nobody talks about. Over-explaining can become a form of self-betrayal so subtle that you mistake it for kindness. You tell yourself you're just being fair, you're just giving them context, you're just trying to avoid being misunderstood. But sometimes what you're really doing is abandoning your own perception in real time. You're acting as if their refusal to understand is more important than your right to stop translating yourself into something they can tolerate. And this is where silence starts to change meaning. Silence is not always avoidance. Silence is not always weakness. Silence is not always losing. Sometimes, silence is the moment you stop auditioning for basic human decency. Sometimes, silence is the moment you realize that not every accusation deserves clarification, and not every distorted version of you deserves correction. Sometimes, silence is what emotional recovery sounds like when you are finally too honest with yourself to keep performing. But the deeper reason is this. When you stop over-explaining, you are not just changing a communication habit. You are breaking a relational contract that may have defined your life for years. The contract said this: I will do the extra labor. I will bring the clarity, the softness, the patience, the proof. And in return, maybe I won't be abandoned, punished, mocked, or turned into the problem. So when you stop, your body does not always celebrate immediately. Sometimes it panics, because it remembers all the times silence was not safe. That's why this process can feel lonely before it feels healing. You stop chasing. You stop justifying. You stop sending the fourth paragraph after the dismissive text. You stop trying to explain why something hurt you to someone who's invested in acting like it shouldn't have. And in that silence, something heavy rises. Grief, anger, shame. The raw realization of how often you were never truly in conversation at all. You were in a one-sided emotional labor arrangement, trying to turn resistance into tenderness with nothing but your own depletion. This is the darker part. Some people only know how to relate to you when you are explaining yourself. They feel most powerful when you are defending your reality, and they're sitting above it like a judge. Your confusion feeds their certainty. Your vulnerability gives them control. And when you stop, they may not lean closer with care. They may get colder, sharper, more offended, more accusing. Not because you became cruel, but because your silence removed a kind of access they had gotten used to. And that can be devastating because it forces you to see the relationship more clearly than before. You realize they didn't want depth, they wanted compliance with emotional detail attached. They didn't want to understand your inner world, they wanted you to keep packaging it in ways that protected their comfort. And once you see that, the loss is real, because you're not just grieving the person, you're grieving the hope that one more honest explanation might finally turn them into someone safe. But then comes another layer. Not explaining yourself does not mean becoming emotionally shut down. It does not mean turning silent with everyone. It does not mean becoming hard, vague, or unreachable. There is a healthy version of this shift and a wounded version. The wounded version says, no one deserves access. No one will ever understand. I will disappear before I can be dismissed again. The healthy version says, I will still be honest, but I will no longer confuse access with intimacy or effort with mutuality. That difference matters. Healthy silence has self-possession in it. It is calm, not performative. It is not a punishment. It is discernment. It is the quiet strength of knowing that real understanding usually doesn't need a courtroom-level defense. People who are trying to understand you may ask questions, may miss parts of you, may even get it wrong sometimes, but you can feel the difference. There's openness in them. There's movement toward you, not just extraction from you. And once you start noticing that difference, your whole emotional life begins to reorganize. You stop throwing your deepest truths into spaces that only know how to flatten them. You stop treating every misunderstanding like an emergency. You stop believing that your worth depends on how well you can narrate your innocence to people committed to a guilty verdict. And slowly, your energy starts returning to you. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in steady, almost sacred pieces. You begin to speak more simply, more cleanly, more truthfully. You say what you mean once, maybe twice if the relationship has earned that tenderness. Then you watch what happens. Do they move closer with curiosity, or do they keep demanding another version of your reality until it becomes harmless enough for them to accept? That's not just a communication clue, that's a map. It tells you where your honesty can live and where it will only be consumed. And maybe that's the real shift. You stop asking, how can I explain this better so they finally understand me? And you start asking, what does it mean that I keep needing to explain basic reality to someone who benefits from not seeing it? That question changes everything, because it takes the spotlight off your performance and puts it back on the relationship itself. It stops turning your pain into a presentation and starts turning your attention toward truth. So, if you've been feeling guilty for getting quieter, slower, more selective with your words, maybe this is why. Maybe you're not becoming distant. Maybe you're recovering from years of handing your inner life to people who only met it with dismissal, argument, or emotional laziness. Maybe your silence is not emptiness at all. Maybe it's the sound of your self-respect returning after a long absence. You are not broken because you got tired of explaining what should have been felt. You are not cold because you stopped bleeding language for people who only used it to keep you in place. You are not failing at connection because you no longer confuse being understood with being endlessly available for interpretation. You are learning something deeper. You are learning that your truth does not become more true just because you suffer while presenting it. And when that finally sinks in, something inside you softens. Not toward everyone, but toward yourself.
You stop chasing impossible understanding. You stop begging for emotional literacy from people who wear indifference like armor. You stop abandoning yourself in the name of being fair. And in that change, you don't become less loving. You become harder to misuse. If this spoke to something you have felt for a long time but never quite had words for, stay with this kind of work, subscribe, and keep going with the next video, because there's a good chance this pattern ends with over-explaining. It usually touches the way you attach, protect, and disappear too. And once you start seeing that clearly, you don't just communicate differently, you live differently.